Okay, we are officially recording. Thank you everybody again for dialing in. We will get started in just a minute. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to get in. I appreciate the punctuality as ever. I'm always surprised that people roll in early, but super grateful. As you guys are coming in, do please share the name of your practice and where you're calling in from, city and state. That'd be super helpful. And in the meantime, I'm going to launch a poll. So you guys should see some questions that show up. Some pretty basic questions about training and how it might impact your practice. And then as the questions get answered, we'll share the poll to the audience so you guys can see how they were, how the responses came through. All right, we've got an interesting concentration in Iowa, Tennessee, and then Ecuador. Welcome, welcome. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining. People will continue to file in, but I think we can get started. My name is Steve Alexander. I'm head of growth at Anagram. I'm joined this evening by Brianna Cuenca. Brianna, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm Brianna. I have been an optician for about 14 years. I'm ABO advanced and NCLE certified, and I've been in all different areas of the optical field. I've worked on the floor as an optician, supported lab side. I've managed busy optical departments. So I've really seen firsthand what it's like working with patients and supporting other opticians and working under busy eye doctors. I'm currently a program manager with Optical Training Institute, where I lead product development and do training support for practices. So I work really closely with our training programs and the practices that use them. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. Appreciate you having me.
It is my pleasure. I started in optical in like 2001, a million years ago, as an optician at a Pearl Vision in the suburbs of Chicago. And when I first joined, when I first started working here, I didn't expect much of it, to be honest, but the combination of being able to help people see and all of the nerdy physics things related to lenses has kept me engaged this whole time. How did you find optical? Like, how did you get into it, and why are you still here?
Yeah, it found me. So I was actually working in the mall and got recruited by one of the district managers in the area for more of a retail office. So I didn't even know what an optician was. I didn't wear glasses, so it was totally new to me. And just kind of fell in love with it. Love helping patients and having that interaction. I love frame styling, but also like, yeah, the science behind lenses and being healthcare, the importance of the, eye health and things like that. So I just think it's an awesome field and very well-rounded. And the passion now sticks for me that, I haven't really been a dispensing optician on the floor in a few years. I've been with OTI for about 4 years now, but I still have that passion of helping people. And so I love helping opticians in our field really grow and advance their career. And I just think it's super important that, we keep our industry really strong in the optical side of things.
What do you think are some of the biggest opportunities that opticians are sort of faced with today? Like things that maybe we're not doing as well as we could?
Yeah, I'm advancing. I don't know that certification is really big. In some states, having license, they are, and then in unlicensed states, it's not as big. And really kind of just wanting to, expand your knowledge in the field, I think is really important. And make sure you're staying up with the industry and having that industry awareness, because there's always new lens products and technologies and things coming out that we really need to be aware of so that we can educate our patients properly.
I find that to be a really important point it is incumbent on us as opticians to educate our patients. But as you said, there's new technology coming out all the time, new lenses, new designs, new designers. What's the best way to keep up with all of that without losing sight of what's worked for you up to now?
Yeah, online resources are huge. Being a part of your state association, going to like networking events. The industry has a lot of really large conventions. Vision Expo is a huge one, but there's a lot happening, and there's some you might not know about that are more local and easier to get to. So definitely keeping up with that. They're great networking opportunities, and I always feel just really amped and motivated after going to some of these conferences, and you're surrounded by your field. It's just really exciting. You get to learn about a lot of new stuff, but definitely online resources too. A lot of places and organizations keep up with the trends and stuff. So that's an easy way to do it.
I think it's super important. As we go on with our conversation this evening, again, I want to thank everybody for attending. Allow me to invite you all in the audience to ask questions either directly in the chat. There is a Q&A section. As we continue the conversation, I would love for this to be interactive, and so we can answer your questions directly. Our goal here tonight, and Brianna, please step in if you have anything to add or if you disagree, but our goal here tonight is to talk about the value of training, specifically optical training. And we've got some things we want to cover, but we certainly want to invite the audience to participate as well. In light of that, why do you think training is such an important topic for practices, I think in general, but more than that, specifically now?
Yeah, I think it kind of affects everything in your practice. You want your team to be confident. You want them to be competent, and they get that from good structured training. And the patient experience is very impacted from that competency that they feel from, your optical team helping them. So you want them to have that credibility when they're working with patients, but they really need to feel confident when they're having those communications with the patient too, and educating them on different lenses and frames and things like that. And I'm gonna base a lot of mine on opticianry because I'm an optician. So sorry for if I say optician a lot, but I am talking the whole staff, front desk, technician, all of that. So yeah, it really matters with the patient experience, I would say. And there's a big difference on being like performing optician and just being kind of there doing your job. And so that is a lot of training as well, and just really getting that ongoing training approach and education. It's just very important.
I'm going to ask you to dive a little bit deeper in something that you just said. What's the difference between an optician who's there and an optician who's doing a great job? What are
Yeah.
the key components of that?
Yeah, I would say someone that is doing a great job, they're excited to come in for the day. They're excited about what they're doing. They're not just clocking in. They have the why behind what they're doing and what they're selling. I think that is one of the key things. Like if they don't understand the why behind why the lenses are going to work for certain individuals, why lens treatments are really important for patients, things like that, they're not going to do a good job at educating that patient then. So that's really important. And just being excited and having that patient interaction. Like you need opticians that have good soft skills. They have to be good with communicating with your patients, and you're passing them from the doctor, someone that the patient really trusts and has a lot of credibility with that patient, and you're passing them off. And the handoff is really important. So if you don't have a good handoff in your practice, that is so important. But you're passing that off to this person. Now this person has to kind of build that credibility and have that confidence to now working with this patient.
Okay, and perfect. And now, like the big question, how do you take somebody from just being there to being the passionate kind of optician that you just described?
Structured training. So structured and consistent training. So really making sure that they're learning, and I kind of already mentioned this, the why behind it. That's really important. So I think it starts with when they're first, in your office, like onboarding. That is so important to standardize that and really set the expectations for what you want your practice to have, right? What you want your team members to be. You kind of have to set that expectation for them right away. In doing that is standardizing your onboarding right off the bat. Every new hire gets the same training, goes through the same concepts right off the bat. It's repeatable, and you're doing it across multiple locations if you have, multiple locations. So every team member, I think that is so important, and team members appreciate that. They want consistency, they want structure, and they also want ongoing support and development too.
So part of this, we put a poll out to the audience, and people as they've been filing in have answered some. The first question we asked in the poll was, how does your practice currently handle staff training? 4 options. Option 1 was a formal structured program. One was a mix of online resources and internal shadowing. Option 3 was mostly on the job or peer-led training. And then option 4 was mostly ad hoc, where we don't really have a defined process. It probably doesn't come as a surprise to you that nobody said we have a formal structured program. Most of the most common response was mostly on the job or peer-led training. Now, I'm not going to suggest that that is in a vacuum a bad thing. What I
Mhm.
will highlight, though, on the job or peer-led training has a couple of pitfalls that you ought to be careful to avoid. And I'd love your take on what I'm about to say here.
Yeah.
So anytime you're doing peer-led training, the peer who is leading that training is being taken away from their day-to-day responsibilities. That's a risk that you're running. They are doing training instead of whatever else they could be doing. The other kind of pitfall there is they're going to train on whatever they come across for whatever period of time they have. So it ends up being sort of haphazard, or can end up being sort of haphazard. Does that align with what you've experienced, what you hear, and why formal training is actually like a better, faster path forward?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And yeah, your training falls on your best people, right? Your lead optician, your manager. So you're pulling them away, and they're already stretched really thin in your practice. And if they don't have time that day, training is falling on who does have time. And so you're not going to have that like consistency that you want. Another thing to think about is you kind of have your star optician or your star technician. You can't assume that they're a great trainer. Like just because they're super talented at their job doesn't make them a good teacher in it, right? So that's something we don't really think about. So it's good to have that communication and understanding, like, does this person want to train? Because if they don't want to train, they're probably not going to do a great job doing it. But yeah, your point on like shadowing, that's great. And shadowing is so, so important. But if they don't have kind of the built up knowledge, the fundamentals to build on, then when they're seeing it out in the wild, shadowing, they're not going to understand it. So there's going to be a lot of gaps. You can't dictate who's coming into your practice. So you're shadowing on all different patient scenarios where really they need to start from the ground and build up. They need the foundations, the basics. They need to understand that before they can start diving into, these more advanced things. So yeah, I would 100% agree.
Excellent. The other question we asked, or another question we asked, and let me end the poll and actually just share the results with the audience so you guys can have a look at it. Question 2 was, what's the biggest challenge your team faces when it comes to training? Half of the respondents said finding time for it. I think that's such an important and interesting answer to this question, because if you're not finding time for training, what are you doing instead? What are the options? If I'm not finding the time in my business to make one of the most important elements of my business succeed, become better, advance in some way or another, what am I risking as a business owner?
Hidden costs that will add up later. So, if you're not taking the time to train that person correct in the beginning, they're going to make mistakes and you're going to always be putting those fires out down the road. So it's super important to get that right first. And it is hard to find time. I totally get it. I've worked very busy practices as a trainer. It's difficult. And that's why using resources that are available to you. I mean, we have so much out there now that helps with this kind of thing. It's very important to say, okay, I know my schedule's super busy this day. This would be great for them to dive into some of the online modules that we have implemented here and things like that. So they can kind of start learning the basics so that when you are finding the time to train, you're very efficient and you're doing it the right way. So it's kind of a mixture. And you have to just like schedule your training, even if it's 20 minutes, 25 minutes of just like really breaking something down and explaining it. You want to set that person up for success, and you're not going to do that if you don't find the time to train them.
Excellent, excellent response. And I would add that, and this is true for optical training, technician training, any staff training or development, any new initiative that you want to bring into your practice. Finding time is important, right? But making time for it is actually incumbent on you to do that. It's not about, well, I've got an hour here, let me do some training. It's okay, hey team, on Friday the 25th, we're doing training. We're going to set aside this time to train on this thing or to implement this change, or we've been building towards this thing for the last little bit and we're kicking it off on Friday. So we're going to do all of this stuff in the run up to it to make sure it's a successful kickoff. It's not, trying to thread the needle between taking care of patients and putting out fires and finding time to do some training. It is about carving out the time, because hopefully everybody on this call will recognize that investing time in training and development is not a cost to your business. It might be initially, right? It might be an initial investment because you're spending time and resources to do it. But if your training results in your team doing a better job at whatever it is you're training at, you will see a return on that investment sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We have a question from Gary in the audience, or maybe a comment. I'm going to read it in full and we'll see what it is. If an optician is just at a location or just for the paycheck and not committed to giving their all to the patients, they'll never get committed to doing their job to the fullest. A new employee needs to commit their all to their job to do their job properly. It's not really a question, but a comment. I think an interesting one. What are your thoughts, Brianna?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that is interesting. And hopefully you can kind of weed that person out during your interviewing process, right? You can kind of pick up on some of that during that process. So I think it's really, really important to have a good interviewing process too. But at the same time, it is interesting, the studies out there that find that it's not just about money for a lot of individuals. They want to feel supported. They want to feel like they have some type of career growth in their position. They want to have opportunities. Those kinds of things, like investing in their development and really showing them like they're important to the team and kind of boosting their confidence and their general morale on the team, that really can make an impact on individuals. So it is kind of important, some of the studies out there, that it's not just revolving around money. It is for some people, yeah, for sure. But again, hopefully you can kind of weed them out and talk, have good questions in your interview kind of process.
I think there is a really important conversation to be had around specifically this. I think there's a distinction we can draw between having a job and having a career. And somebody who's in it for a job probably isn't going to commit the way Gary probably want. But I think the point that you just made is really important. That's something that you want to interview for. You want to hire people who meet your philosophy as a business, whatever that philosophy is. So if your business is built around providing bespoke services with like skilled opticians, than somebody who's just in it to, clock in and clock out and do whatever they must and nothing more, probably not the right fit for you. And I think, training will certainly help if you, like you said, if you commit to them, you invest in their development, they will be with you for a longer period of time. But at the same time, if you hire a person who's just in it to be there and then check out as soon as they can, they're going to be there and check out as soon as they can.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. We had another component of the poll that it was to prioritize outcomes that you would expect to have an impact on your practice based on training. So I had the audience rank the outcomes that they would expect. And one of the things that was pretty impressive to me, actually, they don't expect much of an impact for fewer remakes and errors with more training. They
That's
expect
very
things to,
interesting.
yeah. And I wonder if that's because presuming we're hiring opticians with optical skill, and we're not really training for optical skill. We're training for soft skills, like you were saying, or sales skills, as the case might be. So I'm curious what the audience was thinking, but it was pretty consistent in the responses.
Yeah.
The thing that would be the biggest impact in having significant training is faster onboarding for new hires. And I think that vibes with kind of the expectations of the industry that bringing new people on is such a daunting prospect that people, and this has been my experience, people would rather keep an underperforming employee than coach them out to replace them with the devil they don't know. Does that kind of align with what you've seen as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you know, there's ways to get your onboarding process to be very well done. I guess if I can't think of a better word for it, but there is a way to really onboard them well. And again, it's about setting aside that time. It's about really dedicating those first in onboarding is a long time. Like people think like I'm really busy. I want them to be like day one, we kind of rush it because we want them day one to be able to be productive. But it's so important to kind of really make sure you're not overwhelming them right away and spread it out a little bit. So I say official like kind of onboarding before that person is really ready to kind of hit the ground running, so to speak, is 4 to 6 weeks. So that's a pretty consistent time of training during that time too, and dedicating time to them. But you don't have a really like proficient and super confident optician until like probably the 6 month to 1 year mark. So when I say that 4 to 6 weeks, that's just, they can have conversations with your patients and they can probably, fit and dispense eyewear pretty well, but you're going to be having questions or still with things that need to be stepped in for. 6 months to a year is probably where you're getting more of a very confident, proficient optician.
Yeah, that aligns with kind of my experience when I was first because it was a million years ago. So I'm thinking back to try to remember. But I was trained on site by the owner of the practice, was an old school optician. So I learned, edging and neutralization and all of that stuff like off the jump. And they were adamant about my learning to be an optician before I started talking to patients, which I'm eternally grateful for, right? To understand the physics of it and how lenses actually work, what prescriptions actually mean, and all that stuff. And my timeline was really similar to what you're saying, where I felt like I could have a conversation with a patient 6, 7 weeks in. I sort of knew what I was talking about 6 months in. And by the time I'd been there for a year, I sort of spoke optician. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I learned the language to some extent, to say nothing of how long it took me to get to actually know what I'm talking about. But it took me a year to feel like I could have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a super, super important point. And I think setting those expectations appropriately, not just for your new hire, but for the rest of the team and for yourself when you're bringing someone on, it is not going to be an instant turnaround. And not even if, and perhaps especially not if they have optical training or optical experience already.
Right.
What's been your experience with that, hiring somebody fresh to the industry versus somebody who has, let's say, habits?
I like fresh because then I can help them build the good habits. But yeah, I mean, I've obviously trained and worked with both, and both can do great. But yeah, some have bad habits, so to speak, and can be a little bit stuck in their ways, and they've just been doing that for a really long time. it's just important to show them, you know, the impact that some of those bad habits can have or how things can improve. And you just have to do it in a very light approach. So yeah, both are definitely trainable. New hires with no experience, though, it seems overwhelming and like it's going to be a lot. But if you have something implemented that's going to teach them a lot of the fundamentals, and then you just have your rock star team manager, lead optician, whoever that is, or even the doctor training, you know, every staff looks different, or every practice, I should say, that they're going to have, you know, a good, consistent approach. And if they have the fundamentals down, they're going to be easy to train and to have that understanding, because getting those fundamentals, then you're going to understand more of the why, and then things are going to build. You're going to have kind of progressive learning there, and you're going to be retaining that. So you're, you know, they're going to be a lot more proficient.
Totally agree. Another comment from the audience. I've noticed that when we have an employee that can handle about 80% of their position, we tend to oversee what they can't do. Is that the norm usually? Um, does that does that hurt the business?
Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I understand the question.
Yeah, but my read on it is if there's somebody who can do most of their job, you kind of
Mhm.
let them do most of it. But for the things that you know that they're not well equipped at, you oversee and sort of step in. And Gary, if
Ah,
I'm misrepresenting, please chime in. But that's my read on the question. So, is it common to have staff on for a length of time that they never quite pick up like that last 20% of their position?
yeah, and it's hard not to focus on that, you know, and kind of micromanage that if you know that they're not super developed in that area. But then let's help them, right? Let's train them on that. Let's get them to that level. So I hope I'm answering that right. But yeah, I mean, we do tend to kind of look at that and stick with that and say, oh, they could be right there, but they're, you know, not quite. But let's get them there then. What do they need? What resources do we have available to them? Do they know what resources they have available to them to get them to that level? And do they want to get to that level? You know, those conversations are good to have.
Agreed. And I think it would also depend on like which 20% of the bit of their role are we talking about? Like if it's a business critical part of their position, it's actually unacceptable for them to not know that bit of their job.
Right.
If it's something that it's like a nice to have and you wish they would, but it really doesn't affect their actual role and the rest of their 80% is done really well, then it's up to you to decide how much time to spend on that little bit. So I think it's like so many things we're going to talk about here. It depends on the context, it depends on the rest of the support, depends on the resources you have available, depends on whether or not other people have to fill in those gaps, because it's, you know, training and capacity to do stuff doesn't just affect that one person or the patients that they work with. Anytime a teammate has to pick up slack, that is a cultural hit to your business and something that can't be overstated. It's quiet until it isn't.
Very good points. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, let's talk about training and impact on practices. So, many folks on the call here have kind of ad hoc, peer-led, on-demand sort of training in the moment. Um, how would having a more formal, more consistently structured training program affect patient care and then the bottom line?
Yeah. So when your team is confident and competent from that good training, you know, your patient experience is going to feel very different. They're going to have clear expectations set. They're going to feel guided and not pressured to make some decisions. And they're going to walk away with good eyewear, right? And that's what keeps them coming back. That's what's going to have them refer you to friends and family. Um, Profitability, obviously. So sales can make or break a practice. And there's actually a study out there that found high performing opticians generate about $50,000 per year more in revenue than their peers. So that's a really huge difference. And it comes from being well trained, skilled, and confident in their role. So those conversations with the patients look different at someone who's trained and confident than someone who's not. training cuts a lot of the hidden costs. And I was very surprised to see like remakes and stuff score really low on that poll because remakes is wasted resources and training absolutely does, in my experience, makes such a difference on if the glasses are being fit properly. Are they getting the right frame? They're not getting the right frame from the beginning. If you don't have an optician that knows how to fit a frame, you're going to have remakes because they're not going to fit well. They're going to be coming in for adjustments. They're not going to be able to see well if, big glasses, thick lenses, things like that. So that's really important to train that. And then mismatched lens design, if they're progressive, you're switching them up on that. And they're not adapt to the new progressive that you give them, or just things like that can lead to remakes. Another hidden cost is RX checks. So how many times has your optician sent a patient back for an RX check that didn't need one? That was actually an optical problem, right? So I would say most of the time, again, in my experience, it's not a doctor prescription change. It is something in optical that needs to be solved, whether it's an adjustment or a non-adapt or something like that. And that's wasted chair time that a paying patient should be in that position instead. So, those things all add up. Upper management stepping in to fix problems, just little things like that. Well-trained opticians should be solving about 90% of eyewear complaints without ever sending the patient to the doctor. I feel really strongly about that. So training is kind of this perfect mix of, better patient care, and you have a smoother workflow and just higher average sales. So less headaches in general.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the really thorough answer. I'm going to ask you to jump back to where you kind of started it. What was the dollar figure that you presented at the top of that response? And I'm only asking for you to reiterate this value because I think it's so important.
Yeah, it is over $50,000 per year higher performing opticians are making than peers, which is, that's big. That's a lot.
That's revenue generated for your business, right? So think about whatever scale your practice is at, whatever your optical is currently producing. Would a little bit of investment in training with the result of $50,000 more generated revenue per optician, would that be a benefit to your business? I'll pause to let you guys think about it for a second, but spoiler alert, obviously it would be, because anytime your opticians are, and I think you've touched on this a couple of times, are more confident and competent, your patients can tell. Patients don't know what we know about lenses. They don't know what we know about coatings or brands or why certain lenses work or why frames work with certain prescriptions and why other ones don't. But they know when they're listening to somebody who knows what they're talking about. I'm not a mechanic, but I know when the guy went to take my car to get the oil change, I know when he's saying something that makes sense, and I know he's saying something that doesn't, even though I don't know anything about cars. So it's incumbent on us to be both confident and competent, and I think really importantly in this conversation, trustworthy. Neither of us here, and Brianna, please step in if you disagree, but neither of us here are suggesting sell everything to everyone. What we're suggesting is an optician who better understands your patient needs and can better articulate the solutions you have for them, can better fit your solutions to their needs, and in so doing, generate more revenue for your business because your patients are better taken care of.
Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely not a sales push, anything like that. It is having that solution, like you said, to their visual and lifestyle needs that they have.
Excellent. Yeah, this is so important. One of the things that I find myself saying pretty regularly is opticians create value, right? When your patient comes in, they might come in asking for a particular brand. A common call that I would get when I was in practice was, "Hey, do you carry Ray-Ban or do you carry Oakley?" And say, "Yeah, hey, come on in, we've got them." And at the time I did. But if they would come in looking for them, the odds of me actually selling those to them were pretty low. Not because they make a bad product. They don't. Oakley and Ray-Ban make a perfectly fine product. And for some patients, it's really great. But I had other stuff that I think would better fit the patient for their lifestyle needs, for their prescription needs, because they looked better on them or whatever. And it's not like I was trying to sell them something that was worse. I was trying to dispense something that actually appealed to what they were looking for and not the thing that they heard, right? Because patients are constantly being marketed to, customers are constantly being marketed to, and they remember the things that they remember. Ray-Bans easy to remember. There was a Will Smith song about Ray-Bans a million years ago, and that's stuck in the consciousness. Oakley's, people call in about Crizal lenses, even Verilux lenses or transitions, although sometimes they call them progressives, but whatever. They come in asking about stuff, but it is up to us to educate them on what will actually work for them and tell them why they're getting the thing that they're getting and why it's going to solve their problem. And in my mind, all of that comes from good training and proper articulation of the solution.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what a good optician should do. 100%. Make sure, take what they're saying, what they want. Obviously, their needs and wants are important, but understanding their prescription can have limitations as well. Things like that. That's a good optician that directs them and gets them excited about something that's going to work better for them than maybe what they thought they were coming in for.
Awesome. What are some of the most common challenges that practices face with training or onboarding? I know one of them is finding the time or dedicating the time. What other things do we run into?
I would say inconsistency and like no
Mm,
structure. So I kind of talked about this before, but they get the new hire gets trained on whoever has time in the day if you're not setting aside or don't have that structured training program in place. So you get uneven skills and uneven patient experiences from that. Training falling on your best people, talked about that. They're already stretched thin, so you're pulling them off the floor. That's not great. And then onboarding is super rushed because again, you want help so badly, so you're just kind of quick to throw them in, sink or swim mentality, which is not great. They really need structure. So if someone doesn't get that solid foundation right away, you're going to spend months later kind of fixing that issue.
yeah, the consistency point I think is extremely important because even if the sort of example that I made earlier on is you dedicate the time for it like on this Friday or whatever, but you can't do it on a Friday. Training is something that is constant or ought to be constant. So tell me a little bit about how OTI does it. How does OTI help with consistency? How does it make it more accessible? How does it make it more structured?
Sure. Yeah. And we have lots of different types of programs kind of for like every role in the industry and every place they're at in their journey. So like pre-hire assessments and onboarding and then career development and training. So I'll dive into that one a little bit more in continuing education. I was going to get to also so at the end once you're certified in things, but kind of that career training, you need something that's motivating. Not everybody loves learning and not everybody wants to sit through training, right? They definitely don't want to sit through 3 hours of dry compliance training. So you got to keep them kind of excited about what they're learning. That's how they're going to retain. We find bite-sized learning. So we have a lot of kind of shorter online modules, and that keeps their attention. We're finding that attention spans are getting a little shorter with TikTok and social media and things like that. So you got to keep them engaged, right? So that they are interested in what they're learning. And again, they're going to be able to kind of apply that. So those are really important. Keeping it super accessible, like you said. So online, they can access it anytime, anywhere from their phone, from their computer, from their tablet. All of those things are going to help just kind of take the load off of in-person training in the practice.
And do you find that practices create some kind of like incentive structure to keep their team motivated to go through that, or is it just like here's the training plan and we expect you to follow through by this date? What are the effective ways for somebody who maybe isn't as much of a self-starter as you'd like?
I've seen a mix for sure with our
Okay.
practices. I personally do believe in incentivizing, that person, again, they want that self-fulfillment. Most do want that. They want to grow, but also incentivizing. So if they're going through this kind of training, like some of our programs can be like 6 months to a year. That's a long time of training until it feels like that program's going to be done, right? So incentivizing them to finish, whether that be they get certified and they get a bonus or a raise, or even just fun work, pizza party, I don't know, like things like that. Just it can motivate them and just keep them excited for that training and what they're doing.
Yeah, I think incentives aren't limited to financial ones, although those can help. I think having a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, at least for the initial training, for that initial onboarding, where somebody comes in fresh or with previous experience, you want to get them to the same playing field that everybody else on your team is on, and then presumably they can continue their education through the platform at their own direction or at their manager's direction, as the case might be.
Right. Yep.
What do you think the biggest like missed training opportunity is on in your average practice? Like if you were to guess at like the opticians that like need the most help at this thing, what is that thing?
Troubleshooting, I would say.
Okay.
Really understanding, why is that patient here in front of me with glasses that aren't working for them with this specific complaint. I think that's a big one. And training really helps with that, understanding what are you checking for. And I talked about like RX checks. It is so good to have a checklist in your practice that optician goes through every single time before they're sitting in your doctor's chair. This is how I learned when I worked for an ophthalmologist. He would not see the patient unless I had signed off that everything on that checklist was checked. Did I check lens material, lens design? Did I check base curve difference from, new pair to old pair? OC height, seg height, all of that. So training that, but then not just going through that checklist. If they understand, why am I checking those things on that checklist, they're going to troubleshoot very well and solve, like I said, I think like 90% of your problems, that are very likely optical, not prescription related. So yeah, I would say that's my biggest gap would be troubleshooting.
Well, what's interesting about that is the checklist that you laid out is training for that doesn't just improve troubleshooting, it actually improves fitting also. Because if you know that new prescription and mismatched base curves might be a problem or are a problem that you should check for, then the logic is that when you're ordering eyewear, you're going to make sure that the base curve matches or is as close to matching as possible, given the frame and the prescription and so on. And I think that's something that's so relatively simple when we're talking about it this way, but it's something that is underserved in optical in general. Thank you for bringing that up. The other thing that I think is kind of important is there's a personality barrier often for troubleshooting. When a patient comes in and says, I have a problem with my glasses, I've seen opticians, tenured opticians and new opticians and experienced folks who could solve the problem, sort of turtle up and be afraid of having that conversation. Is that a problem that training can solve, that like formal education can help with, or is it just something you got to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, training's going to build that confidence, what like I've been saying. So if you're confident in what you know as an optician, you're going to take those head on and you're going to say, all right, let's fix this. I'm going to figure this out for you, versus kind of, going in your shell. So as long as they're confident, but some of that is soft skills and having that personality to want to kind of tackle it and dive in. So I'd say a little bit of both.
Got it. Awesome. We are at nearly 8:15, so we've got about 15 minutes left in the session. I want to make sure we've got some other questions to cover. I want to make sure if anybody in the audience has other questions that they'd like to ask directly, please ask now. At the end, we'll share our emails and all that so you can contact us directly, but super valuable, I think. Think of it, if you've got a question about something, odds are other people listening to this will also have that question or a question similar. Okay, so from the industry perspective, taking a little bit of a broader view, uh, how has the role of the optician changed in the last, let's say, 10 years?
I think quite a bit. You have lenses and products are getting a lot more advanced. We have digital designs, custom measurements, new products coming out all the time. So there's just a lot more to understand than there used to be. And patients are relying on the optician to translate all of that and make the recommendations that actually fit their lifestyle and visual needs. Patients also shop differently now. They're online comparing their options, seeing what's out there. A lot of times they have expectations before they even step foot in your door. So opticians need to have strong communication and like sales psychology skills, again, not to be pushy sales by any means, but to guide those patients to eyewear that's going to be very optimal for them and work well for them. So um the other thing is like digital measurement devices and virtual try-on tools and EHRs and online ordering tools. It's just got a little more tech heavy than it ever was. So opticians have to be comfortable using all of those and then still having that very personal good approach with their patients too. So investing in some of these areas for training can help prepare your opticians for like today's, optical.
I want to double click on something you said there. It was not that it's a strong sales, we're not pushing like sell hard or anything like that, but understanding sales psychology. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So not just saying, oh, do you want anti-reflective treatment or coating or AR, whatever you say, presenting it differently. Oh, you have issues with nighttime driving, or asking, do you have issues with nighttime driving? Does it bother you? And then explaining the feature of AR and how that's going to solve that. You can even deeper dive. Oh, you have early onset of cataracts. I see this in your EHR. Kind of diving into the patient record can really help too. Early cataracts, extra glare, you need anti-reflective coating, things like that. So it's not just about like asking, oh, do you want this? It's not about just throwing them all the options out there either, because there's a lot. It's about knowing right off the bat what's going to kind of work well for them through lifestyle questioning, asking them the right questions, finding out some of those needs, and then being able to educate them on, well, this is what I would recommend because this is what I think is going to work really well for you.
I think that's often overlooked, right? This industry, so opticians and optometrists, and by extension, all of the businesses, all the independent businesses are seemingly reticent to be salespeople, right? They're all sort of often pushing back on, I'm not a salesperson, I'm an optician, or I'm not a salesperson, I'm an optometrist. And I think there's a really important distinction that you ought to draw in your heads. We're not saying be pushy salespeople. We're saying you know what the patient will benefit from having in their eyewear or in their sunglasses and their contacts or in whatever services you're providing. And there are ways of presenting information that will increase the likelihood of them doing that thing. And there are ways of presenting information that'll decrease the likelihood of them doing that thing. If you are presenting information such that they're less likely to get AR or the right lens material or the frame that fits their prescription, it's not just that you're not good at sales, it's that you're doing your patient a disservice because they misunderstood or you didn't help them properly understand what the right decision would have been.
Absolutely.
And it's such an important, like, it's an easy distinction to sort of miss, but you're not trying to convince someone to get something they don't need, or at least that's
Right.
not what we're saying, right? That we're saying help a patient understand the things that will benefit them in a way they can understand, in a way they can confidently say yes. And I mentioned when I started in eye care, the optician who trained me used to say, it is your job to get people to give you their money and to thank you for taking it.
I like that.
And it has helped me to sort of crystallize the approach. Like, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm trying to provide them information that they can then make the right decision for them. I'm not personally the biggest fan of transition lenses. I prefer to have two pairs of glasses, or a pair of clear glasses and sunglasses. I prefer polarized to just a tint, but whatever, those are my preferences. My preferences have nothing to do with what the patient's preferences are. And
Right.
if patient says I'm in and out all the time and I lose glasses, I'm going to offer them the thing they're telling me they want, but don't have the words for.
Right.
And I think, opticians ought to do the same by and large. Um, What trends are you seeing now with how practices are investing or not investing in staff development?
So we see, obviously with OTI, we see a lot of that shift towards the structured ongoing training instead of just, learning it as you go kind of mentality. I do think that people are realizing training does reduce turnover. It does boost revenue. So it's kind of becoming part of their like business strategy, and they invest early on rather than doing it as a reaction to solve problems that are already occurring. They're being more proactive about it. Let's not have those problems to begin with, right? We're seeing more adoption of technology in online training and things like that. So online modules, simulated experiences, micro learning. I kind of talked about this, like more bite-sized learning. That does really well, again, with shorter attention spans, but just having something that's flexible, that'll keep their attention, keep them engaged, and doesn't pull your manager off the floor constantly is important.
Totally agree. I think the points that you touched on over and over again are really important, right? Technology continues to move on. You can't pretend like it's not. You shouldn't be fitting the same lenses you were fitting 10 years ago. You shouldn't be using the same technology you were using 10 years ago when patients expect something different. It's fascinating to me when people come in to your office with $1,200 of cell phone, right? And then they see you measure their PD with a marker and a ruler. Like that might be fine. Genuinely, that might be fine. I learned to be an old school optician. I made fitting crosses and uh, didn't really run into remakes with that. But it sort of doesn't matter. It actually doesn't really matter if I'm great at measuring that way or if you're great at measuring that way, because when your patient goes to Warby or LensCrafters or whatever, and they see a digital camera with a green uh, plastic ball doohickey on glasses to measure things digitally, that seems better. That seems more technologically sound. It genuinely doesn't matter if it is. From a patient's perception, though, it is. And that's something that you need to think about, especially when price is an issue, right? If your claim to fame is we offer better service, we have better trained staff, and we'll provide you with a better experience, but the patient can't see it, then it's hard for them to bridge that gap. And fair or not, it is how human psychology works. And it's something that you've got to think about when you plan these things.
Right. And it is so interesting. You think about their experience, they're getting checked in. A lot of times they have like digital forms that you're checking in. So your front desk experience is a little bit more technological. And then you're getting pre-tested on all these, different instruments, very advanced. And then you have your doctor visit, of course, and then you get handed off to your optician who, yeah, is like marking you with a marker. I mean, it does, there's not consistency there in the technology. So that is why I mentioned, it's important for opticians to be able to keep up with that technology. And it's important for practices to have that technology available to be able to do those custom measurements and things for the patients is important.
And that's another thing that requires training. Like anytime you're going to make a big change to how a big chunk of your business operates, that's something that you have to devote time to doing right. Because it's not as easy as getting a thing to put on glasses and taking a picture. You've got to learn, you've got to adjust. And, position aware compensation for progressives is also a thing that you've got to think about and implement and tell your patients about. That stuff shouldn't come as a surprise.
Absolutely.
None of what we're talking about should come as a surprise.
Agreed.
Um, if a practice were to make just one change to strengthen their training or their team performance or any kind of staff development, where would you suggest they begin?
Standardize your onboarding. I think that's the biggest one that's going to show the most ROI. Most problems that practices face with like inconsistency, mistakes, low confidence in their team turnover, they all start because their new hires don't get that proper solid foundation that they need. So if you can make your onboarding very structured, the same across, every location, every member that you have, your team will start being able to contribute faster. They're going to feel more confident in their roles, and you're not constantly fixing, avoidable errors. So once you get that foundation in place, everything else becomes easier. And then keeping it ongoing. You mentioned it, consistent training throughout. People want growth. They want development. We know from research that 55% of employees say they would stay longer at a company that invests in their development. So it is important to people. So, don't think of training as just this like upfront cost. It is definitely an investment in your team. Show them that you support them, show them that you're willing to develop them, and they will be loyal to you.
Excellent. Brianna, I want to thank you for your time and your insights. Everybody, I want to thank you for being here. We've got a couple of questions coming in, so I want to address that. But before I do, if you could, a couple minutes on Optical Training Institute, what somebody signing up for it, what they ought to look for, what they can expect in terms of cost, and what they can get from that. I think it'd just be very helpful for everybody here to see what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah, so we offer all different types, like I said, kind of throughout the learning journey. So we have pre-hire assessments that help you kind of during your interviewing process. You can, if you have an optician that has some knowledge, you can kind of see, where they stand, what kind of training that they'll need, things like that. A lot of people do that during the interview process or after. Let's see where they're at and let's see what kind of training and development we can add for them. And then we have very good standardized onboarding. So let us help support some of those training needs when you're getting them, on the ground in those first few weeks. And then ongoing career training. So developing their skills in whatever role that they are on the team. We do certification exam prep and then continuing education. Because again, once they're certified or even just in the role, they should always be having that continuous approach. So all different kind of price points, I guess, all very competitive with, other programs and things on the market. We try to, have very fair prices and things like that.
All right. And then some contact information, website, your email address. How did somebody reach out?
Yeah. So my email, please reach out. I can type it in the chat too, but it's my first name, Brianna, Brianna at opticaltraining.com. I'm always happy to help. Our website is opticaltraining.com, where you can check out all of our programs and training offerings that we have.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to read a comment from Christiana. In Alberta, opticians are already authorized to refract, and this represents a powerful opportunity for our entire industry. With the right support from partner associations, we can strengthen this pathway, elevate professional standards, and position our industry as a leader in modern eye care. Investing in proper refracting education and training doesn't just enhance clinical skills, it expands career potential, increases accessibility for patients, and helps create a stronger, more respected optical profession. Supporting opticians in this advancement benefits everyone: opticians, optometrists, employers, and most importantly, the public. Can't thank you enough for sharing that, Christiana. That's really important. I'd just love to get your thoughts on that.
Super interesting that they're refracting. That's very cool. And it's interesting how we have different states that have like different laws and regulations that allow opticians to do different things as well. So that's really cool. But it goes back to understanding if you're refracting your patient, you're going to just have that science behind lenses and why they're going to work for them and what kind of lenses that you need to dispense to them. So it just goes back to having more of that knowledge as an optician, which is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Brianna, any final thoughts, any parting words of wisdom?
Oh, I think we've covered a lot. I guess big takeaway, training is not just an upfront cost. It really, really is an investment, and you will see it on your ROI. So definitely invite you to check out some of OTI's training offerings that we have, and let us help you out. Let us make your job and your practice easier.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We will be sending a recording of this out tomorrow. I really appreciate everybody's attention here, your great questions. Thank you, Brianna, for your time. If you have questions for me, my name is Steve Alexander. I'm head of growth at Anagram. It's steve@anagram.care. And then, Brianna, your email address one more time.
Brianna@opticaltraining.com.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys.